Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to continue talking about black-white Ephemerate in Pauper. Specifically, how to sideboard with black-white Ephemerate in Pauper. What we do is the same thing that we do with every sideboard guide on this channel, where we look at the 10 most popular decks in the format. I talk about how I sideboard with this deck against each of the 10 most popular decks in the format, and then hopefully you'll be able to take that knowledge of sideboarding for how to sideboard against the other decks in the format. Let's do it. The most popular deck in the format is Grixis Affinity. This is a value deck that is based around artifact synergies. So obviously, we are bringing in our playset of Dust to Dust. And in my opinion, I don't really like a lot of the other cards. I think there's an argument for Chainer's Edict, but I would rather just be the value deck. Like, there's a really clean sideboard here, right? I like bringing out the Dawnbreaker's Cleric because it doesn't actually do anything. There's an I guess Gentle Repose is fine because you can like exile like a creature in the graveyard so they can't Blood Fountain it back. But I think that's a really corner case like situation to just play a 1/3. And we bring out Suffocating Fumes because the card doesn't do anything against that deck. They're not going wide or anything. And I personally like just remaining the value deck and just sideboarding like these in, these out. I also think that there is an argument for also bringing in Chainer's Edict just for like a little bit more removal, especially since the game, the game is going to go ridiculously long. Like, this is a grind fest, and taking out either Deadly Dispute or Thraben Inspector. But I personally would rather leave these in, continue to just be as much of the value deck as possible in sideboard like this. The second most popular deck in Pauper is Burn. What we do is we bring in Dawnbreaker Cleric because of the mode where you gain 2 life, and it's a great blocker against their go wide stuff. We're bringing in Lone Missionaries, obviously, right? Enters battlefield, gain 4 life, gives us time to start doing this value train situation. We're bringing in Prismatic Strands. When they go for their big swing, being able to Prismatic Strands it and blanket can be really powerful and can often lead to like swinging back for lethal. And then it sort of depends on which version of the deck for your last few cards. So I'm going to do both versions of the Burn deck. The first version of the Burn deck would be just Burns, right? It's playing like Rift Bolt, Lava Spike, like that Burn deck, where the only creatures like Dwarven, Forge Chanter, Monastery Swiftspear, Vaudelaire and Epicure, that kind of stuff. In that deck, I bring these cards in. We take out Suffocating Fumes against the like straight Burn deck. We bring out these like slower value things like Deadly Dispute. And then these cards that cost more mana that you kind of have to set up, like Pegasus Guardian. So this is how I sideboard against like the dedicated Riftbolt, Lava Spike, Needle Drop Burn deck. But there's a different Burn deck that exists as well, where you're still going to bring in these same cards. We're still going to bring in Prismatic Strands, Lone Missionaries, Dawnbreaker Cleric, because they're good against both of the Burn decks. But the other Burn deck that exists is focused around Kuldotha Rebirth, and is like an artifacty Burn deck that goes really, really wide. Against that deck, we're also bringing in Harms of Adar, and we're actually leaving in Suffocating Fumes are the big differences. So we're bringing out the Deadly Disputes. I'm not a big fan of Pegasus Guardian because it's just a little bit too slow. And actually, like, targeted removal is significantly worse as well. So I bring out the Unmakes. 3 mana is a lot of mana for that. So this is what I do against the Kuldotha Burn deck. The third most popular deck is Blue-Black Control. It is I would argue it's a tempo deck more than a control deck. Removes a bunch of creatures, counterspells a bunch of stuff, draws a bunch of cards, and then plays 1 mana 5/5s. We love Chainer's Edict against this deck because they don't have a lot of creatures, and their creatures are very valuable to them, and making them sacrifice those creatures is really, really nice. Bench one of them is Tolarian Terror, which has Ward 2, so it's a little bit harder to remove. I like bringing in Relic of Progenitus. Controlling their graveyard is really good because Gourmet Gangler and Tolarian Terror both fully rely on having like a really filled graveyard. And if you control that graveyard with Relic of Progenitus, then you're in awesome shape. However, cards like Dawnbreaker Cleric aren't that good because they aren't worried about a specific card in the graveyard. They are worried about the graveyard just being full in general. So we are going to bring out Dawnbreaker Cleric. And we are going to bring out Suffocating Fumes. I think this is going to be like a normal thing. You know, these like sideboard cards are playing in the main deck because they're okay in the main deck. We bring out a lot. So this is how I sideboard against Blue-Black Control. The fourth most popular deck in Pauper is the Mirror Match. And this Mirror Match is a toughie. I think Arms of Adar is pretty good. It kills everything but the 5-drops. But frankly, the deck is built to grind in the mid-range, right? And if for a deck that's built to grind in the mid-range, like, you don't really sideboard that much. I don't really like Chainer's Edict because there's like often the board is really flooded and you can just sacrifice the Thraben Inspector, like a Dawnbreaker character, Spirited Companion or whatever. and the rest of the cards on our sideboard are pretty medium. I like Suffocating Fumes because it can take out the Spirited Companion and Inspiring Overseer. It can make combat like a little bit better when we jam in and they like do like really complicated blocks or whatever. And when it's bad, you can just cycle it. So I actually like Suffocating Fumes. But the card that's like kind of bad is we bring out the Dawnbreaker Cleric. And unfortunately, I think Dawnbreaker Cleric is like actively bad in the matchup. So we want to take both of them out. So this is like our first situation that like, rather than taking good cards in from our sideboard, where we're focusing on taking the bad cards out of our deck. Dawnbreaker Cleric is the only card that's actively bad. We already want Harms of Adar. And so we kind of have to bring in a single Chainer's Edict, because it's really the only other card in our sideboard that is good in the matchup. I think there's an argument for Prismatic Strands. Meh. I'm not worried about that. They're there to grind you. That's how you lose. When you lose to this deck, you lose by a lot, and because they're out grinding you, not because they're making big swings with a single colored creature. So this is sideboard in the mirror match. The fifth most popular deck is Ephemerate Tron. What they're trying to do is get a ton of mana and then lock you out with Mnemonic Wall or Stonehorn Dignitary alongside Ghostly Flicker or Pulse of Marasa or like Unwind, and are able to search these things out with Mystical Teachings. And it is definitely like a lockout, like pseudo combo deck. I really like Chainer's Edict against this deck because very often they have like a single Mnemonic Wall or a single Stonehorn Dignitary, and their only way to protect it is Ghostly Flicker. So which means target removal is really tough to make work, and you need to make sure they don't have a lot of mana. The issue is they're a Tron deck, so they almost always have a lot of mana. So the thing about when you sacrifice a creature is things like Ghostly Flicker or like Ephemerate or whatever can't protect it because they flicker. Cool, they get the effect, and then Chainer's Edict resolves, and they've sacrificed their creature. So I like Chainer's Edict against this deck a lot. I like Relic of Progenitus a lot because cards like Pulse of Marasa is a huge way that they lock us out, but it also blanks Mnemonic Wall, which is how we get locked out. And really, like, we want to grind with this deck while stopping how they grind with us, right? We want to be the value deck, and if we can stop their value, which they get through their graveyard, frankly, we want to do that preferably with Relic of Progenitus. That being said, Dawnbreaker Cleric is really good, I think, because Dawnbreaker Cleric means you can take out those really, really good cards in the graveyard so that Mnemonic Wall can't do the thing. Like if you interrupt it with like exiling a Mystical Teachings or a Ghostly Flicker with Dawnbreaker Cleric, that can win you the game, and that feels really, really good. That being said, there are some cards in our deck that are actively bad against the deck. Again, Suffocating Fumes, right? The deck doesn't do that. I also think we want every card in our deck to be really proactive, so I'm not a big fan of Deadly Dispute. And they don't play a ton of creatures that we really care about, and we kind of want to trap them into like forcing them to like take action when we have interruption and things like that. So I'm a big fan of taking out these unmakes and leaving Cast Down as our primary removal, especially since we're bringing in the Chainer's Edict. We don't want to like overload on removal spells, especially when they can blank the removal spells with like a Ghostly Flicker or an Ephemerate. That's how I sideboard against Ephemerate Tron. Mono Blue Fairies is the 6th most popular deck in format. This is a deck that is trying to be a mono blue tempo deck, but also has like cards that have ninjutsu where they can like counter your spell with Spell Starter Sprite because they have a bunch of fairies as well, and then return that Spell Starter Sprite to their hand with like Ninja of the Deep Hours or Moon Circuit Hacker, and then they can counter another spell with Spell Starter Sprite because Spell Starter Sprite returned to their hand, and they also get value off of the ninjas, and it's really frustrating to play against. That being said, we have a game plan against the deck. Number one, Prismatic Strands is actually pretty okay, right? I mean, if you can blank some Ninja of the Deep Hours triggers, like you can blank a lot of the stuff that they're doing, they're mono blue. I actually like Prismatic Strands. Chainer's Edict is pretty okay. We need to control their board. We want to kind of overload on removal because they really, really rely on having these fairies on the battlefield to be able to like do their thing. That being said, everything in the deck is 2 toughness or less. So Arms of Adar is obviously just insane. Suffocating Fumes is pretty good too. Most of the fairies are X1s. It's less good than Arms of Adar. We're in one of those situations is like, but I'm a fan of it. We're bringing out Dawnbreaker Cleric. We don't care about any of the modes against this deck. Not really much else to talk about. And then I think it's between Unmake and Deadly Dispute. I've tried both. I think if I was a sideboard right now, I'd bring out the Deadly Disputes because we can't really blank a lot of removal against this deck. I mean, they play Snap and like Echoing Truth and things like that. But I really want to just like control what they're doing and just like make it so they don't have enough fairies to do their thing, and they don't have enough fairies to do the ninjutsu stuff, and don't have enough fairies to do the Spell Starter Sprite stuff. I want to do that with Unmake more than draw more cards. So this is where I'm at. Though playing at instant speed and like sacking stuff to like outvalue them and getting more mana with treasure tokens is really good too. So I think it's either between Unmake and Deadly Dispute. Kage is the 7th most popular deck in Pauper. Kage is centered around basically being a blue-white control deck, and then having reoccurring creatures like Sacred Cat and Squadron Hawk, or creatures that have a difficulty blocking like Guardian of the Guild Pact. And then in the late game, playing a bunch of gates and pumping them up with Basilisk Gate and killing their opponent in 1 or 2 attacks. That being said, Harms of Adar I actually like a lot. We get to just like kind of control their creatures. They often go a little wide, and it kills most of their creatures. Prismatic Strands is really good because they want to kill you in just a few attacks. Often they'll put themselves dead on board to kill you, and blow them out with Prismatic Strands like feels really, really good. And I'm a fan of Dawnbreaker Cleric. Mostly because they play Journey to Nowhere, which we get our homie back with Dawnbreaker Cleric, and they play the Modern Age, which we can kill a creature with Dawnbreaker Cleric, which is disgusting. I don't like Chainer's Edict because they are playing Squadron Hawk. They always have access to more creatures. They're playing Sacred Cat. They can just bring it back. I don't want to play that game. That being said, we take out our normal scapegoat in Deadly Dispute. And then we want to remain the value deck while we're stopping our opponent from doing the things, especially like Unmake is really good against like Sacred Cat and stuff like that. So we're going to bring out the Pegasus Guardians. It's just a worse Ephemerate, and getting like the 6 mana Pegasus Guardian counterspelled is really devastating. So we'll keep one of them in for the Ephemerate effect and then possibly playing it in the late game. Other than that, I want to remain the value deck. The 8th most popular deck in Pauper is Boggles. Boggles is a really interesting deck. They have hexproof creatures. They suit up the hexproof creatures and just kill you. That being said, Chainer's Edict is built for this job. Often it's on the back of one creature, and being able to like have that one creature die when they have some enchantments on them, they lose. Often they keep hands with only one creature and they lose. Prismatic Strands is really good because it gives you some more time to set up and figure out an answer to that creature. The creatures they're attacking with are very often green. Sometimes they suit up a Spirited Companion, but it's few and far between, and we have other answers to that. I like Arms of Adar. Sometimes they get like the go wide situation, or we're able to remove the enchantments with like the Dawnbreaker Clerics, and we're able to remove their creatures with Arms of Adar. I think it's few and far between, but I think we need to play a little high variance against a deck that is very high variance like Boggles. And I like Dawnbreaker Cleric because you can destroy the enchantments to keep the creatures small, because different than like modern Boggles, Pauper Boggles is in this kind of weird situation where like they have to play a lot of enchantments that are just enchantments and draw cards and make more mana, like Utopia Sprawl and Abundant Growth, rather than ones that like suit up their creature. So if you take out the ones that suit up their creature, sometimes they can't draw into more. And even though they have cards like Spirited Companion that we can remove, generally spot removal is really bad against this deck. So we're just going to take out all of our spot removal and rely on our sweepers. And this is how we sideboard against Boggles. The 9th most popular deck is 4-color Ephemerate. 4-color Ephemerate is kind of like this deck where they're getting a ton of value off of Ephemerate, but they also are playing cards like Lightning Bolt. They're also playing cards like Abundant Growth to fix their mana. They're playing cards like Cerulean Gatekeepers to gain a bunch of life, or Gatekeeper Vine to grab some more gates. And then they're playing the Gates and Basilisk Gates package to be able to like kind of pretend to be like a mixture of Kage and this Black-White Ephemerate deck, where they get value of Black-White Ephemerate but are able to kill in the late game with Basilisk Gate. That being said, because the gates are a primary part of the game plan, if they're swinging really, really big, we like cards like Prismatic Strands. They play Journey to Nowhere, so any deck that plays Journey to Nowhere, we really like Dawnbreaker Cleric. I'm not a big fan of Chainer's Edict because they play Sacred Cat and like Gatekeeper Vine and stuff that they don't mind sacking. Unfortunate, because like it's really good against these Ephemerate effects. And that's pretty much it for cards we want to bring in. We're bringing out Suffocating Fumes. It's a really easy takeout. It doesn't actually kill anything in our opponent's deck. And because removal is so important, we just can bring it out Deadly Dispute, and this is how we sideboard against 4-color Ephemerate. The last deck that we are going to learn how to sideboard against is the Goblins deck, which is the 10th most popular deck in Pauper. Against the Goblins deck, first and foremost, we're bringing in Relic of Progenitus. They're doing a bunch of graveyard stuff like Unearth and Faithless Looting, and they have Putrid Goblin, which persists. Like Relic of Progenitus ends up being like pretty good for a lot of different reasons. And really, they're just trying to outvalue you and kill you with like makeshift munitions. Though I'm not really sure if like a 4 of Dawnbreaker Cleric is actually worth it against exclusively makeshift munitions. We do have to sideboard out Suffocating Fumes. And then I think like maybe you bring in an extra Dawnbreaker Cleric from makeshift munitions and like bring out a Deadly Dispute or something. It's possible you like go full. I think I wouldn't put it past anyone to just like not bring any in and just leave the 2 that are in our main deck in. It's something like that. I'm not sure what is totally correct though. So I'll leave that up to you. So that is how to sideboard with Black-White Ephemerate against the top 10 most popular decks in Pauper. If you like videos like this, please be sure to like and subscribe. It motivates me to make more awesome free content like this. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Make sure you check me out on social medias. Links are above me in the description. Bye-bye.